Good evening, students. Welcome to CMAT 2022 live analysis from imsindia.com. Myself, I'm Girish Khare. I'm the head of ACADS for QA and DILR sections at IMS. So after a long wait, CMAT 2022 was here today. And surprisingly, it was held over only one slot, unlike the multiple slots in the previous years. So anyway, so let's get to the analysis of the exam. So what I was saying is these two sections, general awareness and in INE, that is innovation and entrepreneurship sections. So these two sections were difficult, while the other three sections were on easier side. Okay. So the good attempts, as you can see, 16 to 17 for these three sections, and 8 to 10 for general awareness, and 7 to 9 for innovation and entrepreneurship section. Okay, so these two sections are going to have major impact on the overall percentiles. Okay, so if these two sections were also as easy as the remaining three sections, then probably the percentiles, the marks required for various percentiles would have just shot the roof. But that's not happening because of the level of difficulty of these two sections. Okay. So here is the overall verdict that we are looking at. So a score of something like 295 to 305 should be good enough for 99.5 percentile, and 275 to 285 for 99 percentile, and 255 to 265 for 95 percentile, and 235 to 245 for 90 percentile. Okay? So as I mentioned earlier, the GK and INE sections are challenging questions, and that's going to have major impact on overall percentiles. Okay? Before we move into the analysis of individual sections, here is the some reference for you for the percentiles required for getting call from different colleges. For example, for the JBIMS, for all India seats for their MMS program, you need a score of something like 99.99 percentile. Where it is for 99.95 for Sydenham and 99.94 for Tejas Somaiya, and so on and so forth. For PGDM program, for Great Lakes, you have 90 percentile, and then Goa Institute of Management, 95 percentile and above, and so on and so forth. So this is for your reference, so that you can see how much score should get you a call from which colleges. Now moving to the analysis of individual sections, this one is QT and DI section, that is quantitative techniques and data interpretation section. So out of these 20 questions in this section, 5 questions were on data interpretation, and remaining 15 questions were on quants. Out of the 5 questions on data interpretation, 3 questions were in the form of a set, and that set was on tables, and 2 questions were standalone questions. So 1 question was on table, one standalone question also was on table, and the other standalone question was on pie chart. Okay? And out of the 15 questions on QT, quantitative techniques, 8 questions were on arithmetic. So the questions on arithmetic spanned on all the different topics, such as the percentages. There were questions on time, speed, distance. There was a question on time and work. Then ratio, proportion, profit and loss, compound interest, averages. So pretty much everything, all the topics from arithmetic were covered in this. And then there were 2 questions from geometry. One question was on mensuration and the other one was on triangles. And then there were 2 questions on probability under modern maths. There were 2 questions on numbers and 1 question was on algebra. Although 1 question could have been classified either under numbers or under algebra. So we have classified it under numbers. Well, it could have been classified under algebra as well. So that depends. Now, as per the students' feedback, 1 question in probability, that is under modern maths, had a problem. That is, none of the options match the correct answer. Okay? So that was a problem with 1 question. And the overall LOD of these questions on quants was easy to medium. Majority of the questions were easy. And one striking feature of the questions on data interpretation was that the questions required students to compare between two quantities. Okay, so out of the table given, say sum of quantity A and quantity B against quantity C, and then from that you have to draw conclusions. So that was a recurring theme for data interpretation type of questions. So around 16 to 17 attempts in this section with around 80 to 90% accuracy would be good. So that's what we are saying here. And then moving on to logical reasoning section. Out of 20 questions on logical reasoning, 15 questions were on non-verbal reasoning and 5 questions were on verbal reasoning. Okay? So the 5 questions on verbal reasoning included questions on assumptions and then assertion, analogy, and odd word, and so on. So there were 5 questions on verbal reasoning, and the remaining 15 questions were on non-verbal reasoning. So they included questions on directions. There were 3 questions on directions, and then 3 questions on series completion. There were questions on arrangement. There was 1 question on linear arrangement, and there was 1 question on, say, what they called hexagonal arrangement. So in the sense, when a table was given, the sitting table was in the form of a hexagon. Okay? It's just a variation of circular arrangement, nothing very different about it. And then there were questions on family tree. Now, 1 question on family tree, as per students' feedback, had a problem. Okay, so again, none of the options matched with the correct answer. Okay, so that was the problem with 1 question on family tree. And there was 1 question on set theory, somehow made its appearance in logical reasoning section. So that question could very well have been asked as a part of the QT and DI section as well. So what we're looking at is an attempt of around 16 to 17 in this section, with 80 to 90% accuracy should be considered a good attempt. Then moving on to language comprehension section. So there were 20 questions in this section, there was 1 reading comprehension passage with 4 questions, and the topic was organization and development of mega cities, and the approximate word was 350 words, and it was rather a simple read, and most of the questions were easy to answer. Most of the questions were straightforward. Okay? And then there were as many as 10 questions on vocabulary. So there were questions on antonyms, there were questions on synonyms, fill in the blanks, idioms, and what is the correct spelling of a particular word, and so on. So there were 10 questions of this sort. And there were 5 questions on grammar, such as a fill in the blanks and then identify the correct statement, and direct and indirect speech, and so on. And there was 1 question on verbal reasoning, that is a jumbled statement, sort of a parajumble. Something similar to parajumble, so 1 statement and 4 parts. Okay? So what we're looking at is an attempt of, again, 16 to 17 questions out of 20, with 80 to 90% accuracy would be considered a good attempt in this section. Then moving on to the next section, that is general awareness. Now, this section was a major problem creator for majority of the students. There were 16 questions on static GK and 4 questions on current affairs. And the questions on, out of this 20 questions, there were questions on sports, there were questions on constitution, there were questions on history, and then books and authors, awards, and there was also a question on physics and geography, something related to seasons and rotation of those, and so on. Okay? So what we are looking at is 8 to 10 attempts in this section with 80 to 90% accuracy would be good. Now, if you were in a position to magnify this attempt, then definitely you had advantage over students who were somehow not able to do that. Okay. And then moving on to the final section, that is innovation and entrepreneurship section. So there were 20 questions in all, and as you know, this section was an optional section last year, but this year it has been made a mandatory section. So there were 20 questions in all. And again, these questions were also had a nature of in the form of a GK question. So as many as 13 questions out of 20 were on static GK. Now there were 20 questions on general general awareness section. So which were based on general awareness in the sense static GK as well as the current affairs. And in addition to that, there were 13 of these from innovation and entrepreneurship section that were also based on static GK. So that this gives you an overall perspective that 20 plus 13, that is total 33 questions were on general awareness sort of, out of which 29 were on static GK. Okay? And 4 were of course on current affairs. So that makes it total 33. So almost 1/3 of the paper, 1/3 of the entire exam was on GK. And that is what is making changes in the percentiles that we are predicting. Okay. And 7 questions were on current affairs. Okay. So around 7 to 9 attempts in this section with 80% accuracy would be considered a good attempt. Okay. So that's all from my side as of now. So all the very best for your results. Okay. Thank you and goodbye. Just one point, the areas that were covered were like business, economics and management and various government schemes and so on. Okay. And innovation and entrepreneurship section. Okay. So thank you.